Hey guys, today we're gonna create this crazy flaming forest. Hey guys, my name is Ali. If this is your first time seeing me and you like Photoshop, I'm pretty sure you're in the right place. Let's start creating. Okay, usually I have this 2000 by 2500 pixels. This is a 4:5 ratio for Instagram. This is what I like working with. We'll start off by dragging the first photo, which is our background. I'm gonna make it somewhat bigger, something like that. And while making it bigger, I wanna make sure it's on the thirds, so it's the main objects or my main subjects are gonna be here in the 2/3 of the photo. So I'm gonna mask this image. I'm gonna go to the gradient tool. I'm gonna make sure I'm on the first one with low opacity. Hold shift and using black, make sure you're on black. I'll start slightly erasing, then I'll switch back to white and bring back some of the missing parts we erased. Okay, let's take our second background, which is this image. Let's make it bigger. Okay, this one is gonna be a bit tricky. Let's get rid of the background. And I want this one to be... I want the fire actually to be somewhere here. So I'm gonna keep my image here. Maybe I'll also make it a bit smaller, so we get more of the fire. I want this big fire to be in the middle. Then I'm gonna right click and make sure I rasterize the layer. Then I'm gonna use the rectangle marquee tool. I'm gonna select the image. Then I'm gonna press Ctrl T for free transform. And I'm gonna stretch my upper part. So now we're filling the whole frame. Then I'm gonna add a cursor adjustment layer. Make sure it's linked to that layer, and I'm just gonna make it darker. We want it to look like a flame, so in order for flame to look better, we have to make everything darker so the flame is shining somehow. And I'll bring it down a little bit. We want this to be dark. Okay, let's also make this one darker. Okay, now I can start seeing some flames and good stuff. And I'll add another layer. I'll hold Alt and press click to link it. I'll go to my brush. I'm gonna sample some sort of a bright orange color. Then I'm gonna very slowly paint some of this flame. I believe this is too strong. I'm gonna Ctrl U. I'll make sure it's a bit warmer, the color of the flame. And let's try overlay and soft light. I guess overlay is better, but all we have to do is just lower the opacity a bit. Add another layer, make sure it's linked. This time I'm gonna do the same, but this time I'm gonna put it in screen mode and I'll lower the opacity. I'll also stretch it out a little bit. Let's try actually overlay. I guess screen is the best, but I'll lower the opacity and the fill. Okay, now let's go back to our folder. Let's bring the image of the flame. Okay, this one I'm gonna mask it out. Then I'm gonna press Ctrl I to invert the mask. Then I'm gonna hold my brush, make sure it's on white. Now whenever I paint, I'm gonna bring back. So I'll try to bring back only the part with the flame. And then I'll switch colors. And I'll make sure I'll get rid of all the sharp edges and the bright spots. And this is where our flame will be. We can try using the screen mode, but I'll stick with normal until we get more images and see what we are going to do. Okay, so I'm gonna use this fire elemental photo. It's a stock by Worlds of Magic from DeviantArt. Then I'm gonna use multiply mode so that I'll get rid of the whites. Multiply will help you get rid of the whites. And I want this fire elemental to be somewhere here along the flame, but it's too dark, so I'm gonna use curves adjustment layers, link him down below, and I'm gonna pull him up to make him somehow disappear. I want it to be a bit higher, so I want the flame to be something like that. And the fire elemental somehow behind of it. Okay, we're still gonna fix it. It doesn't look perfect, but let's try using the other flame images we have. I'm gonna put this one to screen mode. I'm gonna Control M for curves. Then I'm gonna make it darker, trying to get rid of the edges. It's not really working, so I'm gonna just use the eraser tool. I'm gonna click rasterize, and I'll just erase the edges. So now we have some sort of a flame. Let's try putting it in a creative way. Maybe here. Let's lower the opacity. Let's copy another one and put it here, and another final one, and let's put it on the ground. Let me stretch it out a little bit. This one is too strong because the ground is dark, so I'm gonna just lower the opacity and fill of it. One more thing I noticed while working, the background is a little bit too bright, so I'm gonna go back to my background, which is this one. I'm gonna add another curves adjustment layer. I'm gonna link it down below, and then I'm just gonna bring it down a little bit. We want it to be somehow dark so that the fire will pop out. As you can see, we missed here like a row of pixels, so I'm just gonna select it. I'm gonna make a selection, and I'll just stretch it up a little bit. So now we don't have that missing row of pixels. Okay, this one I don't really like it. I'll just make it much smaller, low opacity. And the fire elemental here, let's try brightening it up a little bit. And let's put it higher, or the thing is, we need the fire behind of it to be above so that the fire elemental won't disappear into the dark areas. Okay, now I'm gonna mask it, and I'm gonna slightly erase the lower part so like it fades into the background. Okay, now it's time to drag our model. I'll drag it into a different layer. I like to do that when I'm cutting objects, and I'm gonna use the pen tool. Let's try first using the magic wand tool and trying the select subject. Let's see how it's gonna work. Usually it does a good work, but when you zoom in, you can start seeing parts that needs refinement. So I'm gonna start refining some of the parts that it missed. I'm gonna speed up this a little bit. Okay, now since we're done with the selection, you can see I skipped the selecting the staff because we're gonna add our own staff. I'm gonna add layer mask. I guess I missed the part here. Okay, then I'm gonna right click, select and mask. I'm gonna add one point here, make it smart radius, and smooth the selection a little bit. Shift the edge to the inside a little bit and press OK. So now we should have a smooth and nice selection. Then I'm gonna press Ctrl C. Then I'll go to my main file, Ctrl V. So we have our man here. Let's make him a bit smaller, something like that. And I want the fire elemental to look somehow monumental. So I'm gonna sample both the fire elemental and the fire, and I'm just gonna make it somehow bigger. Because this should be some sort of a monster, it's always better if like scary figures are much bigger, so it gives a sense of scale. And now we have our guy here. Okay, we need to give him the staff, so I'm gonna use that staff here. Let me try to select the whites out of it. Add layer mask, Control I to invert, and I'm gonna get rid of the outer, like the flame. Let's add our own flame because it doesn't look good. And to get rid of this white, I'm gonna refine mask, select on mask, and shift edge to the inside while adding some smoothness to get rid of the sharp jagged edges. Now it's time to rotate and put it in his hand. And to do like a double mask, you can see now we have our first mask. Let's get rid of this edges first. And now we need to do a double mask, another mask on top of that mask. How I like to do it is press Ctrl G to group everything, then add a new mask, and then mask it out so it looks like it's in his hand and not outside. Okay, now we're good with the staff and the guy. Let's use that flame. Let's put it in screen blending mode. Let's make it smaller. Gonna make it somehow taller like that. And let's put it here on top of the staff. And another small one on his backhand. So this guy is controlling the fire. Okay, let's go to the fire elemental. I want to get rid of the blacks a little bit, make it less visible. Okay, now I guess we're done with compositing. We don't have any like other photos to composite. Now it's time to blend everything together and color grade the whole image. Okay, let's start with the guy. First we need to give him proper shadow. So I'm gonna alt and drag the layer, apply layer mask. So now I have this layer here. I can do that, Control T, and just stretch it out. Make sure the feet are connecting together so nothing looks odd. And let's make it completely black by pressing Control M and then pulling it all the way down. Now it's completely black, but we don't want it totally black. I'll just leave a little bit of it and put it on multiply mode, and I'll Control J to do a duplicate. Then I'll take one of them, I'll blur it out very strongly, something like that. The other one I'll duplicate it again and I'll blur it out, but something small like that. So now we have two layers, one blurred a lot and one less blur. So the one which is blurred a lot, I'm gonna lower the opacity very strongly, so it just leaves some sort of a trail of shadow. The one which is blurred not a lot, I'm gonna mask it. Then I'm gonna use gradient with black color, and I'm just gonna erase it from far away so it's stronger under his feet and it fades away. And let's also lower the opacity. Another final layer of shadow I'll have, which is this one. I'm gonna make that one on something like very low opacity, like 3%. Another layer I'm gonna create, use a brush, make sure it's black, or just sample any shadow color from the image you have. Make sure it's a soft brush, and with low opacity I'm just gonna paint black under his feet and under the cloak. It's okay if it's not totally black, I can see it's a bit red, but it's okay because we are gonna put it in the multiply mode. And lower the opacity. Something like that is good. I'll do another one, but with black. I just want one which is just under his feet and under the cloak. Nothing else, just under him. Lower the opacity. But then something looks like fake or something like that, and I guess it's because his shoe and his cloak is too bright. So I'm gonna add a layer on top of him, make sure it's the color of the shadow, and very slowly I'm just gonna darken the cloak and darken his feet from below, so they blend with the shadow under. We can keep it like that, or we can use multiply and lower the opacity, or if you're confused, just let's do both, and one with normal low opacity and one with multiply low opacity. So now we blended the guy with the shadow because the light source is coming from here, but keeping in mind that the light source is coming from here, we need to adjust that on the guy. So I'm gonna add a curves adjustment layer. I'm gonna link it below. I'm gonna call this one burn or darken. Then I'm gonna pull this one all the way down, something like that. I'm gonna add some red and some yellow as well. Then I'm gonna press Ctrl I to make it invisible. Now whenever I paint with white brush, I'm gonna bring it back to visibility. So I wanna paint on his back and the areas which are opposite of the light direction. So I'm painting at his cloak from behind. So this is what we made. The best thing about that, I can always go back and make some tweaking. So I wanna make it just a little bit darker, something like that. Now I'm gonna do the opposite, which is curves, and link it below, but this time I'm gonna brighten and I'm gonna call that light, and I'm gonna brighten everything like that. Then I'm gonna also add a lot of red in the highlights and some yellow. So we have orange, red and yellow make orange. I'm gonna press Ctrl I again, then using the white brush again, I'm gonna paint, but this time I'm gonna paint only on his edges. So I'm creating some sort of a light coming from that area. Also, let's paint some of it on the staff. And let's just make a global one from the front side. So this is what we made. So we changed the light direction to be coming from that side and shadow from the opposite side. I saw this area, it's too bright, so I guess we need to go back to the shadow. And we need to just darken this area a bit, because it's bright compared to what's around of it. Also this area. Yeah, much better. So let's get rid of this one for now. So now we have some sort of light. I believe this is too strong, the flames we have here. Their layers were here, I guess. Oh, these two. So I'm gonna group them and I'm just gonna lower their opacity just a little bit because they were too bright compared to the environment. Okay, so now we have our fire elemental, we have our everything. It's time to do like some final tweakings. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna add curves adjustment layer on top of everything, and I'm gonna brighten up everything like that. Then I'm gonna press Ctrl I, and I'm just gonna using a very soft white brush, I'm gonna brighten where the light source is and where our eyes should be directed to. So this is the effect we made, just some small light. Now I'm gonna add a new layer, make sure it's on overlay. I'm gonna use a bright orange color, something like that. Make sure you're on 100% opacity and when you're something like 4% flow. And now I'm just gonna paint on my highlights some orange color just to brighten some things out. I'm gonna brighten the middle of this fire. Also, I'm gonna brighten this whole ground area, give it some color. It's okay if it's too strong, you can always bring down the opacity and play along with it. And one final big one on the middle, and we can always, let's say, bring down the opacity. So this is the adjustment we made. Okay, it's time to do our final adjustments. I like to always use the curves. And I like to pull the black point so we don't have anything which is like totally black and missing detail. So I'll pull up the black point but now we lost some contrast. So what I like to do next is pull down the shadows a little bit. So we bring back some of the contrast and make the bright point even brighter, so we even have more contrast. So this is what we did. It still looks too flat, but using gradient maps we're gonna fix it. So I'm gonna go to adding a gradient map on top of everything, and this time I'm gonna select any of the gradient maps I have here. I have this one, it's already looking good, but we're gonna fix it a little bit. Okay, so this blue, I'm gonna use a blue color for the shadows. The left is the shadows, so I'm using a blue for the shadows, something like that. Okay, and then in the highlights, this is somewhere in the oranges. I'm gonna bring it back just a little bit, and for this one I'm gonna use a yellowish color to give more feeling of the fire. So this is what our gradient map looks like. How I like to color grade my work is using 3 gradient maps of the same color. The first one I'm gonna put it at 6% opacity. I'm gonna do 2 duplicates. The first one is gonna be normal, the second one is gonna be color, and the third one I always try overlay and soft light. So overlay, but then I'll use 50% and let's say 40%, 40%. So this is the overlay and this is the soft light. I guess the overlay has more color and punch into it, so I like it more. So this is our gradient mapping. We added some sort of color to the whole image. Okay, I still think we need some blue in the shadows. There are several ways to do that. I'll show you one very nice way. I'm gonna add what it is called photo filter. I'm gonna add a cooling filter to the whole image. So what the cooling filter does, it makes everything cool. But I want this to only affect my shadows. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go to image, apply image. Then I'm gonna make sure it's multiply and it's merged. I'm gonna press OK. So now as you can see, it's only affecting our highlights, but we want the opposite. So I'm gonna press Ctrl I. So now it's only affecting our shadows. And as you can see, it's ignoring the highlights and it's affecting the dark areas. But if it's too strong, you can also tweak that by right click, blending options. And I want this to be only in the shadows, so I'm gonna pull this. It's erased from the shadows. If I pull this, it's erased from the highlights. So I'm gonna erase it from the highlights, but I don't want a very harsh transition. You can see it's transitioning hard. So I'm gonna hold Alt and just make sure it's feathered and it's somewhere in the middle. So it's only affecting the dark areas. So you can see now our blue is only affecting the dark areas. If it's still too strong, I'm just gonna lower the opacity, or you can always go back, tweak it more or less. You can try another color. You can like magenta. No, I like actually the cooling the blue tone to it, because like having cool colors in the shadows then warm colors in the highlights will create this dynamic and contrast. Okay, so now we're done with the coloring. I'll make it a bit stronger. Okay, let's try adding a photo filter of sepia. I like the sepia always on top of everything. It's like a muted orange. Okay, now when I'm done, I'm gonna hold Control Alt Shift E, Control Alt Shift, then press E. This will merge everything into a new separate layer. I'm gonna make sure it's a smart filter. Then I'm gonna go to Camera Raw Filter. This will allow me to do edits to the whole image in one go. So this is my image now. I'm gonna lower the highlights a bit. I don't want it to be like somewhere missing highlights, and I'm gonna increase the whites so it's more punchy. I'm gonna open the shadows a little bit. We don't want anything missing, and bring back the blacks. I'm gonna go to the tonal curves. I'm gonna pull this one up a little bit and then make sure this one is pulled down, and add some contrast to the bright areas. Okay, then I always like to lower the clarity, lower the texture, lower the dehaze. I know this sometimes doesn't look good, but we're gonna compensate it by using the radial filter, then increasing the clarity, increasing the dehaze, and increasing the texture a little bit, maybe shadows, some contrast, some brightness, and I will draw this in the middle of my image or where the subject is. In this case our subject is the guy and the elemental, so I compensated the reduction I made by putting it only on the guy and on the elemental, so the eyes are attracted to them. Okay, let's go back. Let's add some sort of a vignette. Vignette is a black circle around your image. This is what it does, but make sure it's very like -3 only and -9 or something, very subtle so the eyes can't see it. Okay,